Are you a leader who is getting frustrated with your team members because they are not taking ownership for their projects and tasks? And maybe you keep telling them what to do and how to do it, and you get a pushback or resistance, or they just don't do it. What to do in those situations? How to empower people to build ownership and accountability for their own tasks. That could help you avoid micromanaging and more. It can help you become not only a better leader, but also a better partner or friend. Welcome to another episode of The Art and Science of Difficult Conversations, when we believe when you communicate better, you live better. My name is Lucie. I'm owner of Mind Fittery, mental fitness gym for leaders, their teams and families. I'm here as always with Chris.
Good to see you all. Good to be here. As always, I'm owner of Leadership Potential, where I work with new purpose-driven leaders to navigate difficult and dysfunctional cultures.
Today we're making it a little bit different. I am interviewing Chris today as my guest. Chris, what would you say is standing in the way of people taking ownership and accountability?
Lots of different things. That's such a broad question. I think this is one of those things that every manager I've ever worked with or every leader has complained about. Like, how do I get this person to do more of their job, and how do I stop taking on their tasks? But what gets in the way is, I think a lot of times they may not know what they're supposed to be doing. They might not know the task, right? Like, especially if it's new to them, or if you're supervising frontline people or people new to the workforce and they're out of college, they might just not know what to do. So they might just totally be clueless. So they're just going to revert to whatever they've learned before. If they've been trained poorly in the past by other places or a predecessor, they might just have bad habits that you need to break in some capacity. They might not want to do it. Partially, they might not want to do it because they just either don't want to do it or they don't understand why it's important. They might say, that's not a priority. This other task that I do is much more important because I can see why it's important. I can see what the issue is and what happens if I don't complete it. So let me work on this task first. So they might not just understand how important it is, and they might just feel like it's being done to them, especially for change initiatives. If it feels like it's being done to you, nobody likes that kind of feeling. So they might just resist it because they like the way things have been done. They feel mastery over it. They feel competency. So they're just going to be pushing back, or it feels like they're pushing back.
I'm hearing there could be different causes of the pushback. Mm-hmm. They don't know what it is. They don't understand it, or they just don't want to deal with the change for different reasons. What would you recommend leader in this situation when they have a team member like that? What could they do?
Well, I think it starts with being transparent about what's going on, and because as a manager or as a leader, the best case scenario is why something needs to be done, right? Mm-hmm. If you don't know why something needs to be done, if you're just given an order and you're trying to tell somebody to do something, but you have no sense of why it needs to be done, how important it is, what a priority it is, then you need to go figure that information out first, because you're going to get those questions of why do I need to do this? Why not somebody else? Why is it so important to do it now? You should be able to answer those questions genuinely. And so you should feel confident asking those questions, and not because you want to push back, but because you know that the more context you're given or people are given, the more they can feel comfortable knowing why something is happening. People want to know that why. So working with your own manager or just understanding what the context is. And if there is none, being clear about that, say, you know what? I don't 100% know what this reason is. I don't know why it's so important, but we're being asked to do this right now. It might be because of this reason. I'll keep finding out. In the meantime, let's talk about this. So then you're still at least providing some transparency about why things are happening. And I think leaders are sometimes, we've had multiple guests recently talk about that, like the importance of being transparent and open. Mm-hmm. So I just want to, I'm not going to dive into that. You should listen to those other episodes, but there is a huge value in being transparent and then having that conversation in a way where they can take ownership of it. I think it's called the IKEA effect, where, named after that store. That's why they let you build stuff, is because you feel more ownership. You feel like it's worth more. The more you take ownership of something, the more you feel invested in making sure it's successful, making sure you want to. So the more you can have your employee feel ownership of how the task is done, feel responsibility for it getting done and completed, and the less you can meddle, the more they're willing to do it. Now, they need your guidance because you might have specific standards in your head of what needs to be done and how it needs to be done, when it needs to be done by. It can't be a guessing game. It's got to be something that they understand and they know what the next steps are. Otherwise, it's free for all. They're going to make up stuff in their head about when is it due, what the quality level is, and things like that. So I say always start with that transparency, show them the context, get them to facilitate the conversation in a way that they can take ownership of the task or the project or whatever it needs to be as much as possible, right? Have them feel like they have a voice in the process. Otherwise, they're just going to push back. And then if they push back, then it's just that opportunity that we always talk about is explore. That's an opportunity to explore what's going on beneath the surface. Is it a fear about something? Is it concern that they're not really able to voice because they're just in that fight, flight, or freeze response? But explore what's driving that resistance so that you can properly intervene the best way possible.
Thank you. So I'm hearing different steps. First, figure out the why, and then be transparent and give them the context. You also mentioned facilitate the conversation in a way that encourages the ownership. What are some of the steps there?
Yeah, so tell them start with the big picture, start with what is the goal, what is the thing we're trying to accomplish with this project. Then you slowly go down into, if there are other parts being covered by other people, you could say some other departments are doing this part, we're doing this, we're in charge of this. So we have to do this. Carl, your colleague, is going to be working on this aspect, and Lucie, I need you to work on this part. So blah, blah, blah. And I'll go through the outcomes, what the success looks like, and then I'll invite you into the conversation. What are your thoughts on this project? What are your thoughts on the next steps? What does that look like to you? Get your concerns, if any questions you might have about the context that I didn't explain clearly enough. And then we'll talk through, what will that look like? What do you think the next step should be in order to do these tasks or do this this part of your job? What are the next steps for you?
What I'm hearing also asking them questions, not just telling people.
Yeah. It's a dialogue, right? You can still tell them what they need to do. And it's also then having, what do you think needs to happen next?
When we were brainstorming for today's episode, we talked about asking for permission and how it's that important. Could you tell our listeners a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think asking for permission, is one of the most underrated ways to facilitate a conversation, to empower people. Because if you are if you're in a position of higher power, whether it's formal power or informal power, by asking permission, you're giving power to another person. You're letting them guide the conversation. So as you move on to the next part, I shared this project. Is it okay if I talk about what your role is going to be? Then you're moving forward, and they're part of the conversation itself also. So even the conversation will feel safer to them. It'll feel weird at first because it sounds like you're just asking a lot of times, is it okay if I talk about this? Is it okay if I talk about that? It needs to sound repetitive because you want it to feel like an ongoing dialogue of asking permission, of you're constantly checking in on every part of the conversation. And so that they can't also, as you go through the conversation, they can't say like, well, I didn't agree to be part of this, or I didn't agree. Like, well, yeah, you did agree that we were going to continue this conversation and talk about this. So it's also another stopgap for you to fall back on if they start getting, antsy about being in the process at all.
What would you say if somebody says, well, no, I actually don't want to talk about it anymore. I just want to figure it out by myself.
Okay. Then I would just talk about, okay, if you want to figure it out by yourself, I just want to make sure we're on the same page about these deliverables. That means for you as a manager or a leader, getting clear on, I need these deliverables by this. If you're concerned, then maybe it's breaking it in like, hey, listen, I need 100% completion by this date, by March 31st. Why don't we check in next week? It should take you, a week or two to get to 50% completion. Let's check to make sure you're still on track. And I want you to show me that you've done this much stuff. So it's okay to set those. If they really don't want to talk through every single thing, but some people don't. Maybe they're okay just taking it and running with it. That's okay. Just make sure you're setting up enough guardrails and checkpoints so you can see, is this progressing, or do we need to correct this or do some coaching or whatever?
Makes sense. So create some boundaries. Yes, you can do this. And at the same time, we have to check in those times. Some leaders may be concerned, well, I don't want to ask for permission. They're my employee. They should listen to me. I don't want to sound too weak. It may sound like I don't know what I'm doing for, let's say, if they're asking for permission a lot. It's like sounding too soft.
Yeah, I run into this quite a bit. with people, leaders who feel like I don't want to be empathic and care about their situation more. I just want to be assertive. And they put it at these two extremes. And I always say it's not about either, right? Like they're in the middle. They're complementary to each other. It's not about like you can't be empathic if you're assertive, vice versa, right? It's being assertive. So being clear in your communication, being specific about what you need, and also understanding that there might be things going on in their world that might prevent them from getting things done, or they might be seeing it differently. So it's just helping them uncover those roadblocks. And so it's not about being soft. It's not about giving your power away. It's about you want them to take as much ownership as possible so that you don't have to keep holding their hand through the process. Now, if you're a leader that's like, I want to be in every single aspect, I want to know everything because otherwise I won't feel confident. And I feel like if I don't know everything, then I won't be able to answer their questions. That's a different question. You need to work with somebody else on that stuff, right? But your employees, for the most part, they want to be able to take off and run and feel like they're doing a good job. And so give them as much guidance as they need. Like, especially some, I would say the younger generations might need a little bit more hand-holding, especially if they haven't done it before, if they're new to the workforce. But either way, the goal is to eventually not have any hand-holding, right? So give them that, start giving them as much as possible and not worry about being too soft.
What would be some phrases that you could use that would
For
be
which
in
part?
that middle when asking for permission, let's say before giving advice or before progressing to the next step in the conversation?
Yeah, so I don't like this phrase. I will say that I've seen leaders use it, and I think they can use it. It depends on your personality. To say, walk me through what I just told you, or repeat back to me what I just told you. Mm-hmm. I don't like that one. It sounds condescending when I use it, so I don't recommend anybody ever use it. But if they do and it works fine, use it. Who am I to say it doesn't work? What I like to say is, what are your steps to get there? How do you want to move forward through this? Where do you want to go from here? It's usually leaving it a little bit more open-ended to do that. Or you can even ask, what questions might you have about this? Right? So it's not even asking if they have questions, it's assuming they have questions, and what are those questions?
Nice. Yeah. So very open-ended question rather than close-ended. Did you understand what we just covered?
Yeah. Did you understand? Because
are we on the same page?
Right. Because either they're going to lie to you or they're going to say yes and they truly believe that they understand it and they really don't, or they're thinking about something else. So it's better to just really assess what's their thought process in there.
So for somebody, a leader that is used to maybe just telling people, maybe because it's faster, it seems to be more efficient. Sounds like one of the things that they can take from this episode is to slow down and pause and maybe ask a question.
Yeah. Now, I won't discount that there are times when you do have to be fast. You have to just give a direction and go. There's not a ton of time. And I don't think it's reasonable either to have that everything needs to be like a 2-hour conversation about thoughts and feelings and behaviors. And as somebody that talks for a living, I don't think that's reasonable to do that for every kind of conversation. There are times when you need to just tell them. And I think that's okay as long as you also create space to follow up. So as long as if you say, Lucie, I need you to do this and this and this by this date. I don't have time necessarily to explain it right now, and this is why it's urgent. Can we follow up whatever day, and I'll tell you more information. It's okay as long as you set a follow up for that.
Makes sense. And what I'm hearing, you still gave the context and explanation.
Yes.
It wasn't.
Well, yeah, I would say
now.
You still need to do it now. You need to do it, and this is like very basic why this is happening, and I want to give you more information at this later time.
Makes sense, yeah. So keeps the door open in a way for future conversation, let's say in more depth if necessary.
Right.
Or helpful.
But certainly there's definitely plenty of times when it makes sense to just give the information straight, and you can't have a conversation about it.
What would you say are the situations when that is definitely not the right strategy to give the answer?
Yeah. I think when safety's on the line, whether you are in healthcare, whether you're in manufacturing, when there's somebody's safety on the line, you don't want to sit there and wait. There's safety things happening, right? Or if you are dealing with things that are very time sensitive, like this needs to happen by this date, like by today or right now, or, even retail, if you are with a customer, if your employee's with a customer You don't have time to suddenly like pull back and say, sorry, sir, ma'am, we need to have like a hour-long conversation, and then they can help you with what you're doing.
Makes sense.
That's not like there are times when you just need to get in and out, and, because they're in the middle of something, they're doing something very, very time sensitive, and that's okay.
Makes sense. What about the other situation? When people notice or leaders notice, I keep telling them all the time, are they situations where they should really pause and ask questions, ask for that permission?
Yeah, I would say it's before you even leave that first conversation of like you gave them the task and you're having that longer conversation in general and you're doing the task, you should always end it with, how do you want to handle this if we don't get this done, or if you're not able to get this done by this date and time? And you're trying to build in right away that conversation of what is just that there are consequences if this doesn't get done. And you're getting their buy-in even for that part, right? Like you're getting their buy-in and their idea of like, this is what's going to happen. And so it might be, it's not about like being punitive or expecting them to fail. It's just recognizing that something might come up, that you might not be able to do this. Whether you do it on purpose or not, something might come up and you're not able to finish this. How do you want to handle it? And just keeping it super open-ended. Now, then if they don't follow through, then it's taking that time to explore, hey, listen, I just want to talk about this. You had this thing due by this today with this level of quality, whatever the level of quality was, and it's not done to that standard or whatever. Right? You're missing this, this, and this. You've done this incorrectly, or you haven't done it at all. And, we talked about this, right? So you're laying out the facts, but then you're also asking them, like, what led to this? What happened here? And then you have to decide from that point, like, is it a reasonable reason? Is it a reasonable thing that happened that got in the way? Or is it something that just keeps pushing off? And you should have also, by asking, how do you want to handle this if this is not done? Then you'll know, like, what your next steps are. Because your next step might be a written warning. It might be following your disciplinary process, because if they've let this project go, they've let other projects go or tasks go, you're thinking, okay, we've talked about this and I've tried to coach you through it. I've tried to give you these steps. I need to follow the disciplinary action route, right? It's not going to be fun. It's not going to be happy for anybody. At the same time, if you don't follow that, you're just saying it's okay to do this. It's okay to not do this appropriately. So you have to follow that process and the procedure. You're following the guardrails of your organization.
Makes sense. And I just realized we kind of dove straight in without me asking you about your story with accountability or with asking permission.
I'm never.
What is your personal story or of a leader that you coached where maybe they were struggling to keep people accountable and then they got the coaching and then what happened?
Yeah, there's two, right? I think there's one leader who was giving, because of people leaving the team, he had to give one of his employees more duties, and they both had to take on more duties. It wasn't just this employee. But she was like, no, I'm just not going to do it. Like, just straight up, no, I'm not going to do it. And he was so annoyed by it, understandably so, that's fine. So we had to talk through, how do you explore, like, why, and, it turned out to be like she doesn't know how to do certain tasks and she's already overloaded with some other things that she's trying to do, which is understandable. So it's helping, and then it was coaching her to think through, like, how do we prioritize or deprioritize certain things? Are there certain things we can take off your plate that we don't need to? How do we support you to skill up so you're able to do this task? Right. Recent client that I had, he had the same thing. He had this project that needed pretty high priority project. One of his staff just was not doing it, just kept missing deadlines and not doing it. And we talked through, like, how do you set, more frequent check-ins and about specific, benchmarks that, they're making progress. And he did all that stuff, did everything that you're supposed to do. Still had to let her go because she just kept missing all of these deadlines, missing all of these benchmarks, and just would not say, like, she didn't understand it or didn't want to do it. She just said, okay, yep, I understand it. It wasn't giving any information, so you can't help in that situation, right? Like, if they're not giving you any information to work off of and you're facilitating the conversation as best as possible, at some point you're going to run up against, these are actual policies and procedures that you're violating.
That's a great example, because some leaders may say, well, maybe I just need to have the conversation in a different way.
Maybe.
What I'm hearing from that story, yes, you can try to have the conversations a different way, but also sometimes, even no matter what kind of conversations, it still sometimes leads to ending of the employment. If the targets are not being met, maybe that's the wrong person for that job, or that's the job position is not the right fit for them, for their skill set and interests.
Yeah, it might not just be a good fit. And that's, it's not like a fun thing. Like we shouldn't be celebrating it. But it's just an unfortunate, like it's a disruption, right? It's somebody's job, it's somebody's paycheck, trying to pay their bills. It's tough. And at the same time, you're also, as a leader, you are responsible for their team's function or the organization's function or division. You're responsible for more people than just one person, right? And so it's a trolley problem, right? So if you keep giving this one person extra chances, you're sacrificing everybody else to save this one person. And I'm not saying you should do one or the other in the trolley problem, but in this situation, you have to wonder, by letting this go on, how is it affecting the rest of the culture and the team by you picking up the pieces or not, or letting this person not do their work?
And that's part of being a leader, making really the hard decisions sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which can mean even having the conversations about possibly terminating someone.
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah.
Yeah. Your story reminded me of a client that says that is struggling to keep his team member accountable. And whenever he brings up something, when she makes a mistake and tries to empower her, ask the questions, and either she says something, it's not fixable, it's somebody else's fault, or she starts crying. What would you say in this situation? What might be helpful for the leader?
Yeah, and so this is, you're not managing up, this is just one of the people that you oversee?
Yes.
Yeah, I say for crying, you just gotta name it. Like, hey, listen, this looks like it feels like this is a really tough conversation for you. Do you want to take a break and let's come back to this, or do you want to continue? I think it's human. We want to, well, if we care, if we like this person enough, we don't want to see them suffer. So we don't want to see them crying. It's also not healthy for us to keep engaging into that too much. We're not their therapist. Spoken as somebody who is a therapist, you're not their therapist. So you don't need to sit in there crying with them for, because they're not like suffering, right? It's not like they're grieving the loss of a family member or a parent or some kind of difficult life situation or whatever it is. They're just unhappy about what's happened, this performance conversation. So you need to name it, reflect it, show that empathy that you care and you recognize it's tough, and then just take a break. Say, hey, listen, do you want to take a break and come back to this?
What if that's their strategy whenever they hear difficult feedback, starting crying or getting very emotional around it?
Yeah, then I would start the conversation with asking, hey, listen, I know that the past 3 times we've talked about this, I need to give you this feedback, and it's been really emotional for you. What do you need to be able to stay in here and hear this feedback?
That's a great question. Asking and putting that on them to be accountable for and asking for what they need.
Right. It's hard to tell if somebody is using it specifically to do it, right? They could genuinely just be doing this. They could genuinely just be crying because it really makes them feel uncomfortable in whatever way. And that just could be their reaction. So it's making, like you said, it's empowering them and thinking through, like, what do you want to do? What do you need to be in this conversation? Because I need you in this conversation.
Beautiful. Chris, any question that you want me to ask that I haven't asked yet?
No, you asked all the right questions. As always, the hard part is just executing and having the conversation with your employees.
So, my next question on that, what would support people with execution?
Practice. I think practice giving these instructions with somebody. And you don't have to practice it all the time, not as much as like a speech or a difficult conversation. It is worth just thinking through what's your style. How do you want to do it, right? I was just coaching somebody who gives an instruction and then waffles on it right after, before she even has any conversation. She's like, I want us to do it this way, unless you think there's a better way to do it. And it always, like, the frustrating thing for her, from her perspective, is it always invites more conversation and delays the work even further. Right. So it's about, how do you just practice so that you feel comfortable saying those instructions or the feedback or the words you need to say. And then from there, then you can kind of extrapolate to whatever else. But yeah, I think that practice is really helpful in working with somebody else. It doesn't have to be a coach, right? It could just be a peer, a friend, your partner, anybody. Just say, how does it sound? I want to say this. How does it sound to you?
Nice. A phrase that came up for me is for all of us to remember, or especially those of us that fear, I really want to get it perfect. I want to get it right. And at the beginning, sometimes we don't get it right and we may mess up. And to remember that every master was once a disaster.
Wow. What a quote. What a quote. But true. Yeah. We all learn from our mistakes more so than from our successes. So I think if you can practice and make mistakes, especially if you find a safe place to do it. And then you don't have to feel as much stress about it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Chris, if somebody tuned into our episode just now, what would be the 3 key takeaways that you want them to have?
Yeah. Number 1, be transparent and give context when you're trying to give a project or a task to your employee. Make sure that you and they understand why something needs to be done, when does it need to be done, what does success look like, so that they can understand the big picture. You want them to see the big picture as much as possible. I think that's especially a lot of the younger generations. They want to know why they're doing something. People aren't as happy about just doing something for the sake of doing it anymore. Not that we were ever happy with that, but give them that context. That way they can do it. And then second is the more you can help them create ownership of that task or the project or the next steps, the more that they'll feel ownership and feel like they want to get it done. And you don't have to feel like you're micromanaging them the entire time. So either, I mentioned asking permission to engage in the conversation, asking them what their next steps are, how they would handle the task, what they would do, and then asking them how they would handle it if they don't get it done, right? All of this is about how do you involve them in all the phases of this thing, right? Of all the things they can control, right? Like they can't control the context or why it needs to be done. They can control some of the outputs and some of the things, but they can control how it gets done, right? And that's their job. You hired them or you oversee them. That's their job, is to see how it gets done. Your job is to oversee them, make sure they get it done.
Makes sense.
And the third thing, I think, is just being patient, being willing to have the conversation and explore what's going on for them, and exploring that resistance. You're going to get that resistance, so just lean into it and just understand, where is this no coming from? Where is this pushback coming from? Right? Because the pushback is going to be genuine. They could be fake saying yes. They could fake saying, yes, I understand. Yes, I'm on board. Yes, everything sounds great. But when they push back, when they say no to something, that's genuine. That's a true boundary. They're not faking a boundary. They might not disclose why, but that's a good opportunity for you to figure out, why is this boundary here?
Got it. Chris, if somebody says, yes, this is amazing information, but I'm so overwhelmed right now, I just want you to tell me, to help me, coach me, how can they reach out to you? How they can work with you?
You can find me at myleadershippotential.com on my website, or you can just email me directly, chris@myleadershippotential.com.
I also know you have a course.
Yeah, you can also, if you are more of a self-paced learner and you want to just get better at all these aspects of difficult conversations, yes, I have a course. You can find that on my website. But yeah, check it out. I'd love to. It comes with coaching as part of it. So even if you just buy the course, it comes with coaching as part of it.
Nice. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Lucie.
We have another episode done, completed. Please like, subscribe, ask us questions, such as any other topics or situations that you have. Let us know so we can co-create this show together and create content that is relevant and helpful to you. See you next time.
Bye.